All right. So can everyone hear me? Someone give me like a thumbs up or something. It's weird and like reflected. Just move the camera stuff around a bit. All right, cool. Thumbs up from anyone. So we already got a few people in here. We already have our first question. I feel like this was like, what is this? Curvinut? Curvinut. That's what I'm going to call you. Already with the Screaming Barfies question. Let me get rid of this. All right. How can I avoid Screaming Barfies? And it actually autocorrected to Barfield. That's hilarious. But is there a proved method to avoid the Screaming Barfies? So that's great. Already talking about the ice climbing questions. Here you go. I'll grab an ice tool to talk about this. So I don't exactly know your setup, Mr. Curvinut, but there are a few things that kind of give you Screaming Barfies. Obviously, just being cold kind of does it for sure. Sometimes a lot of times over gripping the tools, like squeezing these too tight, forces the blood out of your fingers. So that can be a big thing that causes cold fingers in general. If you have like wider gloves, or I guess more padded gloves that you climb with, that can cause you to squeeze tighter and then your fingers to get cold. So sometimes thicker gloves actually make your hands colder as opposed to thinner gloves. I do find that the first time I ice climb throughout a season, maybe it's just like, a bit colder or whatever. My fingers and toes are a bit more susceptible to cold. And then after like maybe 3 or 4 days of ice climbing, I get a little bit less cold in general. And so my fingers don't tend to get as cold when I'm doing anything like ice climbing or anything like that. But yeah, those two main things, over gripping your tools and maybe having gloves that are a bit too thick, are very common to get Screaming Barfies or something like that. All right, cool. So yeah, that was first question. I think that's a new record for out of the two simulcast live stream things I've done. Like I even saw that before I activated the live stream. You already asked a question. That's great. Cool. So yeah, I guess we can get started with a little bit of gear talk with this. I'm planning to only go about an hour and a half. So it's 6 o'clock now, my time. Yeah, it means like probably going until about 7:30. For my time as well. So whatever that is in your timeline. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the gear that I climb with on an average day out ice climbing. Obviously, I have tools. These ones are just BD Cobras. Should have front pulled one of these out before. There we go. I had to do a little pack vomit right there. Other tools I've been using a lot of lately are these BD Visions, I believe they're called. Honestly, I kind of bought these things because they were the cheapest tools at the time. I didn't have a whole lot of money. But actually, I really do like the offset handle right here. I think that on any tool is really nice for the active swing. And then these picks, these ones are actually looking kind of bad. I must have let clients use these tools. I swung with these tools last time, but we can talk a little bit about how to sharpen these things, or at least how I sharpen them. But yeah, that sort of curved handle is really great. The second grip is pretty awesome as well. So I think maybe I'll wind up with a pair of Petzl tools at some point, or those Gravel North machines, I think is what they're called, are pretty nice. This tool is a bit more of an all-mountain technical tool. It has a more defined spike right there, whereas this tool really only has these ribs that are designed to kind of hold the handle onto the ice a bit easier. The weight is distributed a little bit differently. I have this one with the hammer, but I could also change it out for an adze, which I've used a lot in the mountains when I'm using these tools, is the adze to kind of chisel out ice to place ice screws. I also like the carbon fiber shaft, and then the handle part of the shaft is pretty slick too. Good lower pommel, good upper pommel. One thing that is worth thinking about when you're buying these things is where you swing from. So this tool with the exaggerated pinky rest right here, every tool has a pivot point to it. So when I swing, to like give you an exaggerated version, I kind of swing like this, and you see how the tool kind of bounces around in my hand. So when I go back, I kind of line the hammer up with my shoulder, and then I swing, and there's a bit of a flicking motion. If you look at my hand right there, a flicking motion, and that's what drives the pick into the ice, because the weight of the head should be pushing that pick into the ice, not so much like pushing or like really jabbing at it with your arms. So having a little bit of looseness in the grip is really what gives a good stick. If I switch to this tool now, this one's built differently, where it's not as an exaggerated of a pinky rest. It's more something that you rest your hand on, but the pivot point is from my index finger. So if I hold the tool like that, you see a little bit of wiggle there. So I kind of, that's the exaggerated motion like that. And so I bring this back to my shoulder, and I can flick the tool forward. Everyone likes to say like you're throwing darts or something like that. I've never thrown darts, so I don't really know what that's like, but that's kind of the exaggerated, that's the motion right there of letting that head weight drive the pick into the ice. Sorry, I got a little confused with the camera right there. Yeah, so letting that head weight drive the pick into the ice. The curve on the shaft is maybe slightly different. You can sort of see it's a little bit differently designed in this tool versus this one, but so yeah, it's kind of just choosing what your preference is, if you like that pivot point here or if you like it in the pinky. I personally switch between the two tools depending on the objective, and I kind of like both the feeling of each of these tools, especially this thing. This is like the North Machine, has that pivot point right there. And these are actually really fun to climb in, but I kind of use them more in the Alpine. Got some more questions coming in. What I used for V-thread, pros and cons of tool leashes. It's a good way to sharpen your ice screws. Oh god, this is a hard one. All right, so yeah, let's. I'm gonna answer all those questions, but yeah, talk about pros and cons of tool leashes. So I have some tool leashes somewhere. Yeah, here we go. You can see I don't actually use these a whole lot because I don't really do. I actually kind of go more leashless, especially if I'm using these dudes. You know, I do have this little bit of 6 mil cord tied in right here. So if I wanted to clip a leash, I could totally go right there, but kind of don't really use that too much. But oftentimes I'm using tools when I'm specifically ice climbing. I kind of use them leashless. And if I'm in the higher alpine, that's when you start seeing me with leashes, because I've actually been like, I had this tool like resting on ice, and I was like drilling an ice screw, and I bumped this tool, and then it popped out, and I almost lost it while I was climbing with it in the alpine. So that kind of scared me enough to get leashes. This is an older version by BD, and you can tell because these are kind of rusty. The newer one is a bit nicer. I got this little swivel thing right here, so that way they don't tangle up too much. I like Petzl's ones that they have. Those are pretty nice. Try to pull out my other tool without knocking all the other ones off. So if I have both my ice tools now. You can, most of the time when you're actually climbing with these things, you clip to the bottom, obviously. And if I drop this thing, then it catches the tool. That's the whole point of it. There are times where you could move it from here to the head. So if I go into plunging the axe on like an alpine ridgeline or whatever, and I still don't want to drop it, oftentimes if I'm not truly climbing, I'll have these things clipped together and then on a gear loop of my harness. And then I just have the tools like kind of separate on their own. But when I do switch to like the real climbing land, then I will engage the two leashes right here. Um, so that's a little bit about when I actually use the leashes. That's what it looks like all together. I don't depend on any of these leashes, especially the ones that are specifically made as like self tethers. One is because a lot of times this little spike on the ice axe is made for, it could probably hold body weight, but it depends on your manufacturer on how much that little spike is actually meant to support your body weight. But also, these leashes are designed to break. I think most of them are about two kilonewtons. This one's rated for 2 kilonewtons, and the idea with that is like if I did fall and this was hooked on the ice, like up here, and I happen to rip off, then this thing will break and it doesn't flick the tool and it swings into my eye or anything bad like that. So you want these actual specifically made tool leashes that are all designed to break at some small force. You don't exactly want to use something like a daisy chain like you would for aid climbing. I've seen people doing that. I've also seen people just making leashes out of cord. I've actually been guilty of that. I've made leashes out of cord for my clients while we're on an alpine route, and then I use these leashes. But the difference there is that they're on top rope, so the likelihood of them really falling far enough for this thing to get ripped out and stuff like that isn't so big. And a lot of times when they make a stick, it's actually really loose and wobbly anyway. So it's more just for in case they drop the tool. But that's more of a top roping situation. If I'm leading, I'm going to use the umbilical cords. And if I'm just doing standard ice climbing, like at a crag out here at June Lake or Lee Vining or something like that, you won't really see me with leashes at all either. So yeah, that's a little bit about leashes. We'll talk about kind of using the string and the V-thread in a bit. So, sharpening ice tools, I'll get to that in a little bit too. Camp Rocket Plus ice screws with the pre-attached draws. Okay, yeah, so I guess, yeah, as long as we're talking about gear, we can do a little bit of ice screw talk. So to answer your question, I haven't used those specific Camp Rocket Plus ice tool or ice screws. I don't think I've actually used any ice screws with the draw attached. It's not a bad idea, that's for sure. I can't really see any pros or cons to it either. I guess one thing is if you do have the screw not fully flush with the ice, let me pull out a screw and talk about this. So if this is my screw and this is my quick draw right here, if that's my, Rocket Plus sort of deal with the screw on the shaft, I drill in my screw and let's say I bottom out right here. Ideally, you would just get a smaller screw, really. But let's say this is the only screw I got. I bottomed out and I'm hosed. The old school trick would be to take a sling, like a alpine draw like this, and you got to figure out how to do it like one-handed. You could either like do a girth hitch or you could do a clove hitch, just like that. And then you tighten it up around the tube, and then you would use that as your protection point, clip this to your rope, rather than clipping to the hole right here, because the amount of space between the ice and your quick draw creates a huge amount of leverage, and that makes the screw way weaker than if I were to go right here and not have that extra amount of leverage. So I guess when you're drilling like those screws with the quick draw attached to the shaft or the tube, I keep calling it the shaft, that would be a pro. But the issue would be if it slides around here and then slides out, especially if we place the screw slightly under. That's a little bit of an annoying part about it. Other than that, I think they're pretty slick. So it's like if we're able to clip ourselves to the ice screw while we're drilling it in. So if we drop the screw, it stays on the rope and we don't lose it forever. It may not be accessible to us, but we don't lose it forever. And then also you just have a little bit of extra security, as you're doing the final cranks to get that screw in. And once it's in, you don't have to reach down, grab a quick draw or whatever. So I think those screws are pretty sweet. Again, I don't own any, but I think that they are really nice. And Saleva actually makes a really cool screw. I think it's called the Saleva Quick Screw or something like that, which builds on that idea a bit more. And I think that they're really well designed. So check them out if you're in the market for some more ice screws. I will say for other camp screws, I did just buy a few camp screws. Perfect. Here we go. I bought 2 of the 9 centimeter screws. This is because I've lost a few 10 centimeter screws in my life. So that's a 9 centimeter, has the red little tab. And then I also bought 4 of these 7 centimeter screws. And I've been ice climbing for a few years now, but I finally just got around to buying these things. And I think they're really sick, actually. I have placed this a couple of times now, especially on, obviously, it's made for thin ice. And the whole point is to, you just want to get that hanger drilled flush to the ice as much as you can. So my buddy was climbing, and he was actually bottoming out the 10 centimeter screws about there. And that's where the 7 centimeter could come in handy. So that's when I went out and bought 4 of these things. Another thing that's kind of interesting about both of these screws is in order to meet UIAA certifications, screws need to hold about 10 kilonewtons before they rip out of the ice or before the other things on it break. So ice screws in general are rated to 10 centimeters. Or what am I saying? To 10 kilonewtons of pullout strength. But both of these screws didn't pass that test. I'm certain they probably lasted until like 8 kilonewtons or 9. So that's like plenty enough for me to be comfortable falling on them. But they technically didn't fully meet that standard. So we don't exactly know what the shear out strength is, or at least I don't exactly know what the shear out strength. It'd be interesting to look. But yeah, when you buy these screws, they come with the usual giant paper of info on it, and it says not used as PPE, which stands for personal protection or personal equipment protection, something like that. So it's kind of a fun little thing, but they are pretty great when things are getting really small and down and dirty. So those are my camp ice screws that I own. Well, let's see now. Oh yeah. On top rope, would you clip the leashes to the rope rather than your harness? So I got a rope right here. There we go. All right, so this is going to be my top rope right here. So what he's getting at is, what do I do with my leashes? So instead of clipping the leashes directly to your belay loop, so I girth hitch this thing through my belay loop. You can just barely see it on camera right there. What he's saying is you would tie into the rope. You just get tied in real fast. All right, so there's my knot. I'm tied in. So instead of attaching this to your harness, you can always attach this to the rope above you. So that way it falls at your knot. These two are attached to your ice tools, and you can swing. And now if you drop a tool, this thing it'll obviously catch the tool. But if you were to fall on top rope, then you don't bring your tools with you. So they just kind of stay where they're at. And that's a pretty good instructional tool. Or if you're just learning how to ice climb and, we're worried about dropping tools, that's a really great trick that's used quite a bit. It doesn't really have any downsides other than you lose your tools on top rope. I don't really do that on like a big alpine ice climbs as much, mainly because that gets in the way of when they're like cleaning gear and stuff like that. It's mostly a good single pitch top rope type tool. So if you're in like the ice park or something like that. But yeah, I totally will clip that into the rope when I'm teaching like intro to ice classes. Oh man, the DMM Vault metal screw holders. Yeah, let's see now. Yeah, so the DMM Vault metal ice screw holders. Maybe refresh my memory. Are those the ones that are actually rated? I mean, a number of companies make the actual rated ice screws that are like, or sorry, ice screw holders that are basically a big carabiner. Gravel makes my favorite one of those. They're really nice, and I think the DMM ones actually they're. I think I remember what those ones are now. Um, I mean, any ice screw clipper is totally great. I love using them. Right now on my harness, I just got these plastic Petzl ones. I've kind of used the plastic screw holders for years now, but I've always been kind of nervous that one day I'm going to lean up against a wall or something and crack them, and then I'm going to lose like $400 of ice screws or something like that. And so the metal ones would definitely help with that. I think the if I'm remembering what those ones look like, I think they're a little small. I do like the Gravel ones. You can fit at least like 8 ice screws on or something like that. They're really big and they're pretty robust and they're probably like fully rated, so you could use them as a carabiner if you wanted to. It may be something that I tend to use like these plastic ones in the Alpine a bit more because they are lightweight and they are still fairly robust. But if I'm out ice climbing at the park or something like that, then that's really nice to have a nice metal screw holder just for daily use and wear and stuff like that. But so far, I've had pretty good luck with just the plastic ones. Yeah, usually just nervous of losing a tool. That's fair. Yeah, when you clip tools onto these things, and then it also gets kind of weird and wonky. I mean, go for the metal ice screw clippers if you want. They're a great tool to have, and then they're you don't really have to worry about anything breaking, and then you're losing stuff. All right, cool. So there's a little bit about um, just answering some general questions. Maybe we'll talk a bit about some subject matters here. Where'd the end of the rope go? Here it is. I lost the end of my rope. I'm just going to get tied in. There we go. We can also talk a bit about ropes too, if anyone wants some like good things, or at least things that I look for in my ice climbing ropes. But in general, the main thing is I want them to be new because old ropes just soak up so much water. All right, so talking a little bit about ice anchors. I know this is obviously not ice anchor. I don't have a chunk of ice in my basement here, but we can pretend. And these bolts are just going to be ice screws sunk to the hanger. Actually, talking about ice screws that I usually put in my anchors. So here is your classic 21 centimeter screw. And this is what I put in my anchor. Yeah. So I usually have at least maybe 2 of these on me. If I'm doing something like a multi-pitch, I'll probably have 2 for sure as my anchor screws, and they're pretty much only anchor screws. And then I could pair these up with most often, I'm pairing 2 screws up. It's pretty commonly this 21 and a 16 or something like that. That's a very common pairing of screws I use in my anchor. If I use a 21 and a 19, that works just fine. But this is usually what I do, especially in the Alpine. And then if I'm on hanging belays or if I'm with 2 clients and myself, so that means 3 people on an anchor, it's pretty common to see me use 3 screws in an anchor rather than 2. I'll use 2 screws in an anchor if it's me and a friend or me and 1 client, or if it's like a semi-hanging belay, not a totally hanging belay. 2 screws are great. I personally like having 3 screws in my anchor if it is a full hanging belay, or if I have 3 people on there, or especially if it's 3 people at a full hanging belay, it'll be pretty common that I use 3 screws. And then also there's the usual criteria of if I have 1 screw and I don't exactly like what it is, then I place another screw. There's actually one time I was doing a really weird thing where I had to do 2 ice screws and a snow picket in an anchor, and I had to build an anchor with that. It was like kind of a weird deal. It was up on Baker. I was doing some weird stuff, but yeah, that was definitely an interesting day. So pretty common is kind of these two screws. I often keep these long screws on my cordelette. So if I have this for my anchor, I'll often keep them like kind of like that long screw back of my harness. So that way I'm not going to use it while I climb and it's out of my way. And then 16 is somewhere on usually one of my, gear clippers because I could use it while I'm on the pitch. So let's say drill a screw, drill my long screw right here, drill my other screw right here. I like how both of them are. And I can move on with building my anchor. Any anchor preferences? Let me ask the audience. What do you guys like building your ice anchors out of? Just giving it a bit of time. Yeah. What about one? Here, I'll throw it out. This exact anchor that I happen to have tied. So if I can undo this and start from the beginning. So this is a double length sling. This is made of like aramid fiber right here. This particular one in general, kind of use this one a fair amount. And you just clip one side, clip the other side. Direction of pull, overhand, figure eight, multi-loop figure eight, whatever you want to. And something I say in all my stuff is make sure that master point is as high as you can get it. So if I undo this and I do an overhand, see how low that master point is? Whereas all I have to do is tie a figure eight or a multi-loop figure eight, just a whole bunch of twists there. And then now I have a much higher master point. So higher master points make me feel more secure. They make anyone else coming up to the anchor feel more secure. Makes it easier to pull in rope. So if you're ever in a situation where you feel like your climber is climbing really fast, it could be because your master point is too low and you're not able to pull in rope. Because I can only pull in maybe 5 inches of rope if my master point's down here. Whereas if it's up here, I'm able to pull in like an entire arm length, like a 1.5 feet of rope. Just to help keep up with my climber. Ideally, if they're on a steep pitch of ice, they're not even moving that fast anyway. All right, I think I have a little bit of delay in the comments here, but I got a few coming in. I see cordelette tips for climbing on. Oh, that's another question. So yeah, cordelette, I used that. Got one right here. Use this in my anchor. And so it's like kind of a different material than the pre-equalized anchor. This is a pre-equalized setup. But if I have my cord, I'm just going to knot the ends together and make it a loop. Get rid of this thing. And I could use this to build the same pre-equalized one, but the thing everyone loves with cordelette is you double it up. I just knocked an ice screw off right there. Yeah, I equalize them out right here. I'll just tie 2 knots. Overhand, figure eight, kind of doesn't matter what you tie. Right there, maybe have to adjust the knots a bit. And now I have a quad anchor. So what's the biggest benefit of a quad anchor over something like a pre-equalized setup? And the big thing there that you should be thinking about yourself is the self-equalizing. Yeah, so I put just about equal pressure on each of my screws right here. And that's kind of the big thing, no matter which way I shift. Whereas that pre-equalized one, you shift one way and then all of a sudden all your weight's on one screw. Here, it's no matter what I do, it's kind of spread throughout the entire anchor. And that's kind of like a big thing right there that people love using the quad for, especially in something like ice climbing. because of that shared load. If I have a bunch of people stacked onto this anchor, if you have 3 ice screws, you can still make a quad anchor. So if I drilled my 3 screws right here, what I do is I kind of pick my most bomber screw. Let's say it's the blue carabiner for the sake of clarity. So that's going to be like my most bomber screw. And these 2 are maybe my 16 and a 13 or something like that. I drilled to have 3 ice screws. So what I can do is clip the 13, clip the 16 together. So the 2 ones that aren't as bomber, and I pull that down for equalization. Go up here, tie an overhand. And then I tie another overhand just like before and clip that into my bomber screw. And now I have a 3, it's hard to see with a knot, 2 equalized on one side and then 1 equalized on the other. And that's how you equalize 3 pieces. Now it's obviously not perfectly equalized, right? Because you get like kind of 50% on here and 25 on these. But that's why you want to make sure that this is your most bomber ice screw. So that way you can, incorporate that one on its own side of the anchor. So yeah, and another thing I like about the quad obviously is I can be clipped here and I can belay off the other shelf. And then when I secure my clients, I give each of them their own shelf. That gives a bit more comfort for each of them instead of just both of them being latched onto one single master point. It actually does create quite a bit of comfort, I've found. All right, let's see now. We got some other questions. Oh yeah, do you clove hitch the rope into your first screw before building the rest of the belay? Yeah, totally. I would totally do that. Maybe got scenario-itis out. I could just take a quick draw, put that in. And then the key with the clove hitch is learn how to do it one-handed, because I can clip this in just like you normally would. And then by reaching around the back and bringing it forward, I now have a clove hitch. Yeah. We can try doing that from another angle. See now, if I'm clipped in, and this isn't back clipped or anything. Here's my knot. Here's the quick draw. Reach around. Does that look better? This look better. Yeah, okay, here we go. Let's try that way. Reach around, and then I have my first loop of my clove hitch right there. Make my second loop without this thing twisting. Second loop, bring it in, clip it to the gate. Just mess around with it a little bit. And that way you can hold on to the quick draw while it's in your ice screw and then do that. And even if you're pumped out on some sketchy lead or whatever, then you can secure yourself, no matter where you are, to any ice screw or any ice tool. Got my ice tool. I got this little thing right here. That's what it's for. I get sketched out or pumped out or whatever. I can go in. Well, this is hard when you actually have to hold the tool into the ice, but go in just like that, clove hitch myself off, and I can sit and rest. This is 6 mil fully rated cord with a double fisherman's. So that's a really good skill to have, is just to be able to throw in a clove hitch real fast right there. All right, so moving back to the anchor stuff. Let's just move right on with the whole system. I can attach myself right here. This is visible in the camera. Off belay, and then I can do the direct belay right off of here. A few people expressed some interest in last videos where I talk about split rope technique. So I can talk just a little bit about that. If you're not familiar with split rope technique, that's probably because you're not a guide. This is really more of a guiding tool, but it is kind of useful if you're just in a group of 3 and you want to belay people up, just move together up a big climb. So it is a useful kind of group of 3 trick. And it starts off with kind of one person being in the lead. Let's say that's me. I can tie in hard to this rope. This is the one I'm leading on, so I'm totally tied in hard here. This one I can either clip here, I can tie in hard to my harness, Or I could take another carabiner, just like that, and I could even clip it to the back of my harness. Because if I clip it to the back of the harness, it helps stay out of the way of my crampons. This lead rope is already in the way of your crampons. For anyone who has led on ice, I'm sure you've felt that pain. And so having this clip to the back kind of helps keep it out of the way. What I can do, I can also transfer this to my anchor somewhere out of the way when I get to the top of the pitch, just so that way I don't have that thing hanging on me the whole time. So in that scenario, I got to my anchor, I drilled everything, I clipped in, let's clip in, and then I took the rope off the back, clipped it to the harness, or sorry, clipped it to the anchor. So now if I'm going to belay two people up at the same time, let's talk about some considerations. So in rock climbing, we do that a lot. It's called parallel rope technique. And the idea with that is both ropes are going through the same piece of protection. So that way both climbers, in this case blue and orange, they'll go up, and it's if blue person is first, they unclip their rope and they leave the orange rope in. And then the orange guy climbs up and he cleans all the gear as he goes up. So that's just a little bit of basic parallel rope right there. In ice climbing, you don't really want people climbing directly above each other like that, because the top person's going to knock off tons of crap on the lower person. And so what we do in ice climbing is we do split rope technique. And the idea with that is two people climb. They're like 5 to 10 feet apart, but they climb up together parallel. And the considerations, the main ones there are, you as the leader have to either lead up one side or the other and only clip one rope in, whichever one you're leading on, and leave the other one free. And that actually takes a bit of work to like plan it out in your head to make sure that both ropes don't get twisted, because you get one twist in there and that kind of ruins the whole thing. So you have to keep them divided the entire way up. And this isn't exactly a parallel rope climbing class right here or a split rope class. This is really something that we have to do together out in the field. So you can book me for a day of instruction and we can talk about all the considerations for this and practice it. But this is just a little bit of a primer right here. Another consideration are belay devices. So you're going to be using guide style devices. Let's just start with one and talk through that for a second. Let me pull up some rope. So if I put these both in one device, there we have it. So that right there is standard parallel rope climbing. And this way, since both ropes are coming up from the same place, I can pull rope in on one side and I can pull rope in on the other side. This anchor is getting kind of low for me. There we go. That's nice. Just move that anchor up a bit higher for the camera. And I can pull one rope, like the blue rope, and I can pull the orange rope. You can pull them separately. You can pull them together. You can, you notice how I'm holding each rope kind of in between. Some people call this split finger technique. I tend to hold them like that, so I can pull one rope while pulling the other, or while leaving the other rope normal. And that allows me to adjust the rope between both climbers. Maybe one person's moving faster than the other, or one person's just standing still for whatever reason, and I can give those climbers each their attention. Now, the issue with this in ice climbing, if we're doing split rope technique, is because if there is actually a degree of separation, if you drop the whole device, it doesn't help with belaying either. But let me move closer. So right there's the device. You can see the two climber strands. So let's say I have a piece out to the side right here. Now I get this sort of separation. If the orange person waits at that time, then the way how these things lock on the rope, right, is the climber strand pinches on the belay strand. That's how these things actually lock up. So if I have a rope trailing off in the distance, like if this is the rope that's straight down and then this one's off on my other dude, and then the orange person falls, or through a variety of other things, the climber strand will not pinch on the brake strand. So you can actually get a sliding thing, and I don't know if I can create it here without people. There we go. If I pull the rope out to the side, you see how all I have to do is I can just pull it with my hand. So that's a huge reason why they've stopped calling these devices hands-free, because if you find those specific situations, it doesn't lock up. So I think, holding your brake hand on the strand may also not really give enough friction for you to actually hold a fall. So the way how you solve that problem when you have ropes that are far, like 5 to 10 feet away from each other, is you add 2 belay devices. So I'll have that one there, and then I carry another belay device, another locker, guide mode, and I can even put this on the other shelf right there for, again, a bit more separation. Pull these things up. There we go. So blue rope is in the Mammut device right here. Orange rope is in the Petzl device. And you can, you do what you need to in order to belay with these things, but in ice climbing, it'd be pretty common to have these things pretty spread apart, something like that. And I can still keep my brake hand on both the brake strands. Right here, if I get it organized enough, I can still have both my brake hands on both the brake strands, and I can pull in rope on separately on either device, just like this, or I can pull both together if I need to, and I can easily keep up with 2 climbers like this. The only thing is you won't really keep your stack super clean, but it's more important to just belay them. And so you can deal with like the messy stack when they get to the anchor. You have to separate out each rope. Each rope has to remain separate, so you can't flake them together. And that's a way how you can climb efficiently in a group of 3. I think that's all that's worth saying about that, but that's why I carry 2 different devices on my harness. Actually, oftentimes I carry 3 because I also have the Gigajoule, which I can use as one of these, but also I end up giving this to clients a whole lot. So that way, if I do fall, there's a little bit something extra holding me instead of just an ATC. And these mechanical devices tend to work better on icy ropes than something like a Gree or something like that. If you have dry ropes, if you're in Colorado, Grees are fine. But if you're in a more wet environment than an iced up rope, Grees essentially useless. Greetings from Bolivia, Juan. Nice. Thank you, Juan. I got a bullet. Actually got someone who's viewing me from Bolivia. That's pretty crazy. All right, cool. Does anyone have any questions about that? I think that's all that's worth mentioning right now. Just clean up some stuff right here. Another thing, I guess, if I'm building anchors for top rope climbing, that's another 3-screw sort of deal. A lot of people tend to underestimate kind of how much force is in top rope climbing, but you can always think about at least it's going to be, at minimum, it's going to be double whatever your climber weighs. Because if I weigh 200 pounds and I fall on my anchor, the belayer on the other side of the anchor has to put 200 pounds of force in order to hold me. Yeah, so I'm the climber. 200 pounds on this side equals 200 pounds on this side in order for the climber to hold me. In order for the belayer to hold me. So that puts 400 pounds roughly of force on my anchor. And so, and that's just like the start of it. If you get a little bit of slack in there, then you add in maybe 600 pounds. In top roping, the forces can actually build up quite a bit. Maybe not as much as in a lead fall, but still quite a bit. And especially if they're ice screws that are there all day that could be exposed to the sun or something, I'm definitely going to put three ice screws in there. And most often I'll actually drill a V-thread. Like in any sort of serracking situation, I'll probably put a V-thread in my anchor and then have 1 or 2 screws along with that, depending on how long the anchor is going to be there. because that V thread really helps to, it takes a lot longer for that thing to melt out, and V threads are a lot stronger than ice screws. So it kind of stacks the odds in your favor for sure. All right. Hey, I'll just configure this. So in ice climbing, it's pretty common. Like, we already know that falling while ice climbing is bad. And that's, yeah, that's kind of like rule number one. Like, the biggest mistake in ice climbing you can make is falling. And the idea with that is, obviously, since you have crampons on your feet and ice tools in your hands, you're going to probably break something. I mean, you can have a clean fall and you can swing right in and be fine. Plenty of people have done it. Plenty of my friends have done it. I still haven't fallen while ice climbing yet, knock on wood. But the idea is that you want to place protection so that way you're not going to die rather than not get hurt. In climbing, we stick a cam in, we can climb 20 feet above, we fall off, we swing right in, everything's good. Of course, if you hit a ledge on the way down, then you're still screwed. So ice climbing, you can have little bulges, little ledges. The minute that any crampon touches that, it gets caught and then your foot gets twisted some weird way. So if we know that no matter what we do, we're going to fall and get like massively injured while climbing, the protection is really there in case we, just swing down and just to keep us from really like crashing in and dying. So there are a few things you can add in. I know someone in the chat mentioned screamers. I have a few. Where I have them. There we go. Guess I should have prepped that one beforehand. So Yates makes some pretty nice screamers. That's a company, YATES. And these things, I don't exactly remember like the stats on them and stuff, but they're basically meant to be able to hold about 2 kilonewtons of force. And then the minute you put more on them, they fan out. So this thing is just a bunch of webbing that's folded together. I can also, if I had webbing on hand, it's basically like if I were to take this there we go. So these are my 2 clipping points. All the webbing is just accordion together. So that way, if I'm clipped right here and I happen to fall, it breaks apart. So that way it helps reduce the force on your piece of protection. And the way how that's done is this is like flat tubular webbing, and there's really light stitching holding it all together. And then in this case, you have a little like cover thing over it. So that way it just kind of holds it together more. But at about 2 kilonewtons, that light stitching rips apart. The thing fans out to about a double length or whatever. And then you get on the fully strong 22 kilonewton rated webbing right there. So I mostly use screamers when I'm like doing sketchy aid climbing. Maybe this is on like a micro nut or something. And if I fall onto it from above, this can help reduce the load on that. And a lot of people use it ice climbing, obviously, because it just helps play the odds in your favor of reducing the force on the ice screw. Ice screws in general are totally strong enough to catch a bunch of different falls. So it's, maybe you would place it on like a suspect ice screw as you're drilling it in. But going along that same vein, in ice climbing, it's a bit more common to use like the fixed point belay. And so that one is, I actually have a video series that talks all about it. But the fixed point belay is essentially making the climber fall on the anchor rather than fall on you as the belayer. And why is that important in ice climbing? It's because when we position our belays, we want to be off to the side of a route, either left or right. And oftentimes we have some sort of overhead hazard. So if you're going to pull your belayer into like a roof above their head and they get knocked out, then they can let go of the brake strand, and then who knows after that. So this kind of helps protect the whole team, as well as if you find yourself in the situation, this is very common in ice climbing, but also pretty common in rock climbing, of a large run out off of the anchor. You know, in the old days, we would go to the Jesus piece or whatever, where you clip the rope into like the upper bolt, and I'm still on belay right here. And if my climber falls, even if they're like 30 feet up, I still have a, you know, a piece right there, so I get yanked up. But a 30-foot fall is that's pretty aggressive, right? And if you just go on this little 2-to-1 right here on this bolt or an ice screw, then that can be catastrophic for one. And then also a belayer can easily get sucked up into here. And once the any sort of device really hits a carabiner, you never know how it's going to react. So by belaying directly off the anchor, we can protect those big runouts off of the anchor for one. And then also we can help protect the climber and the whole team in general. So it's a useful skill to have. And in the end, I don't know if this is worth doing a full live stream about. I guess if you guys want to have an entire live stream dedicated specifically to the fixed point belay, I'd be happy to do that. But I'm going to show you a few anchors that involve this, and or maybe I'll actually instead, because I'm looking at the time right now, I'll show you like one anchor that's very common, and then I'll move on to more belay styles, because it's kind of more important to know the belay styles than the anchors, I'd say. So what I'm going to do is I have a nice double length sling right here. I find the bar tack, here it is, and I'm going to slide that to the end. And then right here, I'm going to tie a bowline. So the way how I do that is fold it around, bring that tongue up, and then I can take the other end, and pass it through. And then I have a bowline. I would show you guys that again, but there's plenty of videos out there showing how to tie this knot, including a different method that other people use. So I'll leave you on your own time to kind of find or like dial in how you tie that bowline on a bite right there. And if you're familiar with bowlines at all, pulling them in this direction technically isn't the way they're designed to be pulled. So sometimes if you pull them this way, if you tie in with like the end of the rope, I wonder if I can make it happen. Where's the other end? Yeah, let's see if I can do this just right. So if I tie a bowline in the end like this, bowlines are designed to be loaded like so. So it's tied like this. If I pull apart on the strands, it's not uncommon for this whole thing to just, the tip of the rope is holding it. Let's say that pops out. There we go. Depending on how loose you tied it and how much force you put on there, it could actually just pull apart. This one being a bowline on a bite with that's a full-on closed loop right here. It's totally acceptable to be pulled apart like this. So that's kind of the way how you can tie a bowline and cross-load it like that, and then it's still safe, is if you tie the bowline on the bite in this fashion. And they've done pull tests. This is coming out of Europe. They've done pull tests on this, and I think most of the time it fails at full strength. So it's more than strong enough anyway. Now moving on to the anchor considerations, I'm going to take that other piece out. We're just going to have a nice 2-piece anchor for this. And in ice climbing, right, we want that nice diagonal offset about 30 centimeters away. This would be a little close, but, depending on the ice, maybe. Usually I'd have them a bit further away. And I have to decide which screw is going to be like my belay screw. And most of the time that's going to depend on going left or going right, like for the next pitch. So in this case, the next pitch is going off to our left. Hope that's left in the camera there. And so that means this screw on the left side is going to be like my belay bolt. So I'll take off the non-locker there. I'm going to place a locker. Yeah, I'll place it. Yeah, that's good. So locker right there. I can clip the bowline into that. And I'll lock it. Gonna measure out. I hold the bowline down like this to measure it out. And then up here, you have a few options. You could always just clip this in and tie an overhand. A bit more of a clean looking way is to clove hitch it. Definitely makes you look more Euro. So there we have it. And then a lot of people, like, you take this strand, you clip it up here just to get it out of your way. A lot of people will make the argument that, oh, the clove hitch slips because I saw pull tests. In the real world, clove hitches only slip like 2 inches, 3 inches max. So this is just getting the tail out of your way. It's not preventing the clove hitch from slipping off the carabiner. So now I have my anchor. A few other things is you want this to be a locker because this is a very critical point, right? I'm belaying my person directly off this point. So if this goes undone, then you're kind of hosed. This is okay to be a non-locker. A lot of demonstrations will show a locker here as well. That's your call. But that is just backing up this. And then no matter what anchor you build, you want this to be double-stranded. So you see single strand right here, double-stranded. And that's in order to meet the strength requirements needed for this technique. You double up a piece of material, it becomes about 1.5 times as strong because of the whole knot here. But, if you take one sling, double it up, it's roughly twice as strong as a single sling. And now as far as belaying goes, there's a few methods to belay. The easiest one by far. I will also say I tend to clip myself in to the master point right here. And that does do a few things. One is it secures me, but also if my climber falls on this thing, it does give a little bit of shock absorption to the anchor and makes their fall a little bit more comfortable. All right, so I'm secure. Going other side right here. Very common belay system right here is you just do a Munter hitch. Whoop. There we have it, Munter hitch. And so you can either do a Munter hitch, you can do a redirected plate, but one thing you cannot do is any brake-assisted devices. What they found is that when someone takes a fall with a brake-assisted device, like a Grigri on here, it actually can strip the sheath of your rope just by the dynamics of the fall. So you have to have either a Munter hitch or an ATC with a redirect, which I'll show in a second. And because of how much slippage there is, you got to wear gloves. So ice climbing, we always wear gloves. If you're doing this as a rock climber, you got to put on your belay gloves. Otherwise, you're gonna get a rope burn on your hands, and that's gonna suck. So I have it in feed out mode, and all you do is just push rope in to the Munter hitch here and pull it out the other side. And that's how you avoid getting your rope all twisted up, is you actually have to push rope into that Munter hitch, keep the whole thing nice and wide, and it helps with, like, your rope barely gets kinked up even throughout a long pitch. And I can belay someone all the way up the pitch with this method right here. That is totally okay. If you just feel like doing something different, then that's when you add in the belay device. So you always think, or at least I always think, just follow the pictures on the belay device, climber's end on that side, belay end on the other side, and I can lock this. So right here, climber's end, belay, break end, and then I redirect this through another carabiner, the break strand. So that way, if my climber falls, the device gets crammed up against the carabiner and I can easily maintain break strand. It can be a bit more annoying to pull out rope, but what I do is if you roll the rope like this and then push the rope through, it feeds a lot nicer. Yeah, so just add in that little twist of a rope and then you can feed rope out really easily. And yeah, those are the two main belay methods for a fixed point belay. So maybe that's all that's worth going into with that. Unless anyone has any questions, have you guys seen anything weird out there with any sort of fixed point belay? Again, this is something that I kind of use very much in the ice realm, multi-pitch ice, or in the realm of multi-pitch rock climbing with large run out off of the belay. There is also another method where you rig up this whole thing and belay the climber out until they're past that large run out, maybe they get a few bomber pieces in, and then you can switch from this back to the gree or whatever on your harness. And it's not that hard of a transition, but it is another method, so that way you can go from this to a more common belay method. So it's what we call the hybrid technique. All right. Yeah, let's call that good on the belay, fixed point belay right there. I'm getting a ton of questions about sharpening stuff, so I think it's time to get into that. But if any other questions come up, or if you guys have something pop into your mind, then just give it a shout out. I don't mind straying off topic. All right, so I had to just run and get my file. So I have a few different files here. And generally speaking, I have, just like a few tools in my backpack that I carry. This is my newest file that I actually kind of like. It has, well, there we go. You can see how it kind of tapers from the center down, just kind of nice. And then I also have this Trango, forget kind of what they call this. It's like a crampon ice tool type multi-tool. It's specifically made for that. What we have here is like, Phillips and Allen wrench, flathead. We have various other Allen wrench sizes right there. On the inside, you also have, on this side, you have a tiny little file right there, and then a wrench that's hard to see. I'll pull it out. There we go. This little thing. So I can use this for adjusting screws on crampons really easily. I can also use it for adjusting screws on ice axes. And it all folds into this little pretty cool looking package right here. It was kind of worth the money, but I keep this in my backpack. I keep this file with me, and then I often have other spare whatever for crampons and stuff. This is a file I keep at home. This is a small little flat bastard file, and this is what I use on ice screws more. And then I have a really long file, which I can't seem to find all of a sudden. It's probably gone, that I may use on crampons or ice axes. However, I've just started using this more. So if I have my ice tool, and let's see now, this one's pretty dinged up. Yeah, this one's looking pretty bad. I also find, Black Diamond, their picks are a bit thinner, a bit more delicate than something like a Petzl ice axe. And so it's just something about like the metallarchy, the design. So these ones kind of need a bit more work than something like a Petzl ice screw. I got to do this. Usually I sit down and I put this handle in between my feet right there. And an ice axe actually, or the pick has like 3 points to it, right? You have the two that come down in the front right here, and then you have underneath that flat part. So you have to maintain those 3 points. And really, like, a nice roadmap to follow is buy a new pick and then use that to model your old pick on while you sharpen it. But what I do is I just hold the axe, and oftentimes I'll I've also done it this way, where I kind of put the tool under my arm, or I usually balance the whole thing on my leg, and just something so that way this is super solid. Actually, holding it like this isn't too bad. And then you line up the file with the angle on the pick that you want. And then you do these, like, the first few feel kind of scratchy, but after a while you can tell how it's long, even strokes. Yeah, on that side I can do it. Whoops, my foot just slipped off. In the end, it's nice to do this while sitting in a chair. It's nice to have some gloves. So right there, I essentially reprofiled the two angles, right, or the two faces going down. And then in the end, you'd also have to flip it over. This one's pretty critical. And I would balance this on my leg, but I got to do it up here for you guys. And if I had that, yeah, there we go. Definitely worth wearing gloves. And then there's still a bit of work to be done, but you can sort of see it is sharper. I can feel it with my finger to see how pointy it is. It looks like I still need to do some work on it. It's really hard to see in the camera, but I still got a little bit of burrs going on, and I haven't fully sharpened one side of it. But that's essentially what I do is I go one side of the pick, the other side of the pick, flip it over and get that flat side, and then maybe I go back one side or the other. Yeah, I've seen people do it in other angles too, like they'll go down like this instead of mine where I went like that before and now they're going straight down. That totally works. I mean, like whatever gets the thing sharper. But that's essentially what I do with my pick. Sometimes, or actually most of the time, I have had to sharpen these back teeth. So the whole point of this, right, is this one is the penetration into the ice. And you can see my pick is actually getting quite a bit smaller and more worn down in the front right here because I've been sharpening it a whole lot. And this angle is actually going from like this to that quite a bit more. So I'd say this pick actually doesn't have, it's probably getting close to the end of its life. But I can go down these teeth right here. I just line up the angle. And if I had this thing balanced against my leg and, I was holding this file better, but I can sharpen these teeth just a little bit. The point is this goes into the ice and these teeth are what hold the pick into it. So as long as you're using that proper swing technique at the start right there, the axe should hold itself in. And then this top part needs to be sharp as well because the way how you get the axe out of the ice is you go up and down and you don't wiggle it. If you wiggle it side to side, you can actually bend the pick, especially on black diamond ones. So you have to go up and down and use that serrated edge to pop the axe out. So when these things start to get older, like this one is, I will go in and sharpen the upper part of this because even the top part of this pick gets burrs and doesn't stay serrated. So I don't really sharpen all the way back to here. Maybe if there's someone who's doing crazy dry tooling, they would. Of course, this pick isn't really built for dry tooling. You'd have to switch the picks. But yeah, you can definitely see that this one's getting to the end of its life. And if I was better, then I could reprofile it. I could shave the pick down a bit more like this. And then you can work these picks back. I have this one guy I work with. His name is Tim Farr. He's like the ice master. And he can shave his picks all the way back to here. And they're still like sharp and ready to go into the ice. I'm not good enough for that. So pretty much when that front tooth is worn down for me, it's like basically vertical. Even now it's like kind of pretty bad. But once it's like vertical, then that's kind of when I switch to a new pick. I have a new pick now. I don't have two. I probably need to buy a new pick and replace these soon. But yeah, these the more I look at it, the more this pick is actually getting pretty old for me. Let's see now. Anything else worth saying? I don't really sharpen these bottom parts because look at them. They're just there for holding into the ice. You can always sharpen the spike on a more specific type tool. Talking about other sharpening stuff. That's right. So crampons. So now I have two pairs of crampons that I use for ice climbing. I have BD Stingers. These are mono points. And then another crampon I use a whole lot are the Petzl Lynx. So this one's kind of cool. It can either be mono or dual point. I have them set up for dual points right now. I've been using these a whole lot lately, or like the past few years have been Lynx years. And I just recently went back to the Stingers just to try them out, go back to monopoints. It'll probably be easiest to show you on these things. Let me, whoop, okay. Just drop one on the ground there. So monopoints, right? They have a monopoint. You can see how essentially crampon points are the same as the picks on your ice axe. So you have, you just have those same corners. And these ones I've worked on a little bit. You can see how, I have the two front points right there. I flip them over and I do that flat section, and then I form that same point. I really like to look at the tip. This is probably impossible for you guys to see. Maybe you can right there, contrasting against my beard. You see how that's a pointed tip right there? That's kind of what I look at when I'm like, okay, yeah, these things are pretty well sharp. Another thing I'll say is that crampons, they don't have to be as sharp as your ice picks or like the picks on your ice axe, because as long as you can get that crampon into the ice and then you get those secondary points to engage, then you're kind of good to go. So your crampons can be a lot more dull than the tips of your ice axe, just because you have the force of you kicking in there. And as long as you get those secondary points to engage, that's your stabilization on your foot right there. Another thing, a lot of people don't feel like their crampons are super secure on the ice, and that's because it's not fully adjusted to your boot. And these things have to be pretty tight. Here's my ice climbing boot. And this is the right one, yeah. So just taking a look at this, if I slot this on, right there, that's the first test to make sure that your crampon's getting to the right size of your boot. Notice how the heel posts right there are holding the heel in. If I pull it gently, you can see it's only the heel posts that are holding to the boot, and then along with that front bail right there. So that is step number one. You can see it's actually pretty tight. And you can see on this one, just by the way the boot's made, Black Diamond, their heel posts are super wide for whatever reason. So you can see how the heel is jutting pretty far away. But that's a really tight, nice fit. If I go in for the latch, this one may be a bit of a fighter. Yeah. So yeah, if I latch it in, that's really just locking it down, but it's already pretty stable on its own. The front point, you can see the boot, the tip of the boot right there. So it's always a balance between how much front point you want. You don't want a huge amount of front point because that gives you a lot of leverage and that pumps out your calves a lot more. But you want enough of the front of the crampon showing so that way you can engage those secondary points. So that's kind of the trick right there, is the balance between the least amount of front point, but still able to engage your secondary points. And so this is what it looks like from the other profile. This is the way how I have this one set up. And so that's kind of the balance right there. And you can hear if your crampon is loose when you kick into the ice, and you hear like a little tinging sound with your foot, because that pretty much means the crampon itself is like bending at the center bar right there. So if you hear that, then your crampon's probably a little loose, and that's why your feet don't feel as good as when when it's tighter. But that is definitely the first step in my book, is getting those heel posts snug on the heel. And then maybe I have to bump this thing around a bit. Maybe I have to bump the front bail a bit. Really just like have someone there with like a good amount of ice climbing experience. It takes a lot of practice to get good at dialing in crampons. So just, yeah, make sure you have someone there to help you through it. I actually, when I first started ice climbing, I had these crampons, I think, and I put them on my boot, and I like stepped to the left, and just immediately right there, that one step, my right crampon just shot off my foot. So just at the very start, I didn't like, I was not good to go for ice climbing. Like I had my crampons totally dialed wrong. But yeah, essentially, actually almost forgot. So the secondary points, sharpening these things is super easy. You just shave along the same angle as the point. So see how that one right there is going up. You just shave along that same point. Don't go any other direction. Same way, long, even strokes. Ideally, I would get like an even longer file, like a nice 9-inch giant flat file for industrial work would be the most ideal. This is just one that I have in my backpack for quick in-field repairs. But now, it's like, again, hard to see with the camera, but I just sharpened along this flat section and it makes the tip right there sharper. And that's pretty much all you need. I mean, especially the secondary points don't need to be that sharp, just enough to balance on the ice or get a little bit of impact there. Okay, so ice screws. It's funny, I actually turns out a lot of my ice screws were dull and I didn't even do any, like, I didn't know, and trying to place these things was really annoying. So like I really had to like push them in. And then I bought these new ice screws and these things went in so easily. I was like, oh yeah, okay, there's something wrong here. But yeah, ice screws. So you can have like 4 teeth ice screws like this. Black Diamond makes 4 teeth. Camp makes 4 teeth. Petzl screws have 3 teeth. Doesn't really matter. You know, it's just like whatever they designed them for. Trying to find a screw with like some burrs on it. But I kind of sharpened all these because I'm pulling out of like my screws I've been using. But this is really hard to show you. You can see right here on this, I can't do it with the camera. This tooth right here, you see how it has essentially 2 angles right there. Oh, there we go. That's perfect. Right on this side and then on the other tooth side. So what will happen, just like any other ice tool out there, is burrs will form here and here, and then the tip will wear down. So I could use this file. I found it a bit easier to go back to my small little file because this one doesn't have the curve that I like in this one, like the taper isn't in this one. This is just flat. So it makes it a bit easier. And the key is just to go along the tooth. I can brace the screw against my boob, and you have to line the file up with that whatever side you're sharpening. So if I go in real close and I want to sharpen, say, this one right here, that tooth, I line the screw up at the correct angle of that line, and then it's kind of hard to get a good even stroke. Again, bracing it on something, which now you can't see in here. And ice screws, they take a little bit more work than others. I personally don't really like sharpening ice screws, especially ones that are already sharp. But you can see, yeah, with me right here, what I'm going to do is just restore back to basically the factory is that tip right there, because that's what's engaging the ice. And shave off any little burrs. And you really don't need to shave that much. I find with ice tools, with crampons, you kind of need to shave a bit more. With ice screws, it's kind of like less is more, just enough to like regain that corner and keep it sharp. This one actually needs a bit of work. Yeah, and what I do is to test it, I grab my hand and I just twist against the soft part of my hand right there. And I feel how much it bites. Helps to have a new ice screw. Like I can feel that one bite into me. That one's actually like quite a bit sharper than this one. I think all my ice screws are just really dull. Another thing I would kind of recommend, and I haven't pulled the trigger on this yet, is just buying one of those ice screw sharpeners where Petzl makes one where you go into the hole and then you slide it across the file. So the ice screw or that the guide and the file just line up perfectly. And then you can sharpen your ice screws a lot easier than with the file. I find that the file is kind of hard to work with, and the screw. I think ice screws are some of the hardest things to sharpen, really, as opposed to like well, anything else really. But yeah, it's just sort of like maintaining that factory sheet, that factory spec, keeping the ice screw sharp, and then yeah, over time, obviously these things will wear down, but I mean that's what happens when you use gear. You will notice a difference if your ice screws are really dull. There we go. So yeah, just a little bit of work, and this thing's already biting a lot better, and it'll go into the ice a lot smoother for sure. I don't really do anything with the threads right here. This is why I use steel ice screws in a lot of my like standard ice guiding, because the steel just lasts so much longer. You know, the aluminum ice screws are great because they're light, so I use those in the Alpine a whole lot. But if I pull out some of these things, let's see now if I can find a good example. Some of these, you can definitely see some wear in the, oh man, this is hard to see. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this on the camera, but I can definitely see some wear happening in the threads just from the aluminum being worn down as you drill that ice screw into the ice, and even taking it out a little bit. So aluminum screws are great, but because they're super light and everything, but they just will not last as long. And I'm not so worried about the teeth at all because obviously these are steel. These are still decently sharp. Actually, kind of doing bad. I should probably sharpen these, but I'm pretty sure the shaft is going to wear down before anything with the teeth. Just the way they are. That's why I save these just for when I'm actually in the real Alpine with long approach. And then my steel screws are my total workhorses. Let's see now. So that's screws, that's crampons, that's ice axes. Yeah, I mean, like I'm not the master of ice climbing in general, but definitely of like gear involving ice climbing stuff. I don't think I've been doing it quite long enough, and I didn't grow up in the years of like pounding these things in and twisting them and stuff like that. But I can talk a little bit about placing them, obviously, especially with more modern screws. So let me actually just start with grabbing a few different screws. Let's dispel some misconceptions here. So I have 3 different types of screws, 10 centimeter, 13, and a 16. You'll notice how, especially if I hold them this way, hang on. There you go. If I hold them like this, you can see how especially on these 2 screws, notice how the threads are the same length on a 13 as a 16. And if I even pull out a bigger one, that's when it's really obvious. The threads are the same height on a 13 as they are on a 21. So why is that, right? That's because back in the day, we used to place ice screws like this. So at I guess this is called a positive angle. And so what they found in actual testing, we used to place them like this because it made people feel good. And with really old technology, when you're actually pounding these things in and maybe twisting them a bit, you kind of had to place them like this in order to actually get them in the ice. But what they found with testing is when you clip a carabiner or a quick draw to them, then you get a levering action in the ice. So the idea is the strength or the conception of the strength was that the strength of the ice screw was in the tube. And so that's why we placed them up. But now, because of that levering action, it caused a lot more force on the bottom ice and caused these things to rip out a lot easier. So the new idea, or like based on actual science, is you place them at a negative angle. I think that's what it is, negative angle. I may be getting those mixed up. And if I place it in the ice like so, I'm depending on the threads to actually hold the ice screw. And that's the deal, is the actual strength of the ice screw comes from the threads, not from the tube. So if I have this up at a negative angle and then I pull down, there's much less torque on the ice. And the ideal angle to place these things is slightly above like 15-ish degrees upwards. Manufacturers, if you look at the pamphlet that it comes with, will recommend to go at 90 degrees perpendicular with the ice. And the idea with that is when you're hanging from a tool and trying to place these things, it can be kind of hard to make sure you're at that upward angle. So they just recommend going 90. And a lot of times I have this at 90 degrees. And then if I'm placing an anchor with my big fat anchor screw, I oftentimes am in a place where I can use two hands. So when I'm making an anchor, I often hold my really long screw here, and then I do the whole placement thing and drill it in. And because I'm holding it with my hand, I can get at that upward angle. So all my anchor screws are pretty much always at the upward angle, whereas my screws that I'm placing while climbing may be more perpendicular. If I'm good enough, I can get them like this. But that's why companies will recommend going 90 degrees, is they don't want people getting too caught up in the whole upward downward thing. Yeah, so that's like the reason why the screws are the same length, especially on the smaller ones. You can see like this 7-centimeter screw, it goes pretty much up to the hilt where the threads are, and that's just to get as much strength out of them as possible. This one too. Whereas when you get into those longer ones, they keep the same amount of threads, but they stop after a while. There are times where I will place a longer screw on lead if I'm getting a lot of air pockets or something like that to drill in past all the crappy ice to the good ice. All right. So yeah, that's a little bit about ice screws. I think we had a V-thread question a while back. Someone asked about, what do you use to string a V-thread? Okay, yeah, that's an easy one. So I actually have a little kit on my harness, which every ice climber does. This is just a carabiner. This is like, I guess you could say, my rappelling kit. Double length sling for like an extension. I have a third hand here. And in this case, I have the Petzl V-thread tool. I forget what they call it. Oh, it's called the multi-hook. It says it right on it. And it's literally just like a tube of plastic with a little hook right here with a sharpened edge. And also you get a little cutting section for if you're leaving cord behind. And a lot of people still make them out of coat hangers. They'll unwrap the wire coat hanger, make a little, like bend the tip a bit and take a file and file it down into the sharp stuff. When it comes to threading rope through, first off, actually, let me also talk a little bit about drilling V-threads. And it's nice to use the long ice screw for it. Steve House, and it's Steve House. He says that he's used stubbies, like maybe 10 centimeters in hard alpine ice to drill threads. I kind of I believe that for sure. When I'm drilling V-threads, this is going to be really hard for me to show you here. This is more of, again, outside taking a class. But I usually go into the ice and I make a few notches with my screw. And once it goes in maybe a centimeter or two, I take it out. And then that's when I angle 45 degrees or whatever. And then I drill full depth with that screw. That's my first hole. I'll take the screw out. And I'm practiced enough that I can just use the hole. But another thing you can do is leave this screw in and then grab another 21 to help sight the screw. Or another thing I've done in the past is just taken a smaller screw and rolled it into the hole. And then I use this same screw to measure out my V-thread. But once I get that other hole, I go about a screw length, the same screw length apart horizontally. And then I go in a little bit. And same thing, I gouge the ice, tip the screw about 45 degrees. It's the same angle as the first one. And then I try to intersect that other hole as far back as I can. Once I get this started, I look down the other hole and I can imagine in my mind where they're going to intersect. If not, I can actually leverage the screw one way or the other. And a lot of times I don't intersect them right at the back. A lot of times it's like, if this is my, here, I'll use 2 screws for this. So a lot of times if this is my first hole, the second hole ends up right here or yeah, somewhere down here. It doesn't fully connect right there. I'm not good enough. This is okay. And then also a number of times I get it kind of offset like this, one way or the other. And that can be okay. As long as they're able to thread the rope through, you're good to go. So if you drill a thread and it's not perfect like this, then you're a lot of times it's okay. If you go right here, you know that's way off. But if it's somewhere in the middle, a lot of times, you know, that's totally fine. I actually have a story. I may I'll wait until the end, but or may not. I was like doing a little multi-pitch ice with this dude once, and I showed him how to make a V thread, and he thought that it was a little shallow, and he was like, "That seems a little shallow, you know, it's like not strong enough." And I was like, "Oh, you know, we'll find out." We climbed like 3 or 4 pitches up, and then we had to rappel 3 or 4 pitches down. And by the time I rappelled down first, I built an anchor, and then I put myself on it, and then I was like, "Off rappel." By the time he made his way down to my anchor, I had the next V thread drilled, backed up, and already threaded with the rope. And then all we had to do is pull the rope through and then clip in. And we did that like 3 times. And then we got to the ground and I was like, "So you still don't like my threads?" And yeah, he shut up. So there you go. That's how you make your clients feel bad about themselves. Anyway, other things that are useful is the end caps on ropes. So these things, you know, it depends on your rope. Here's a Sterling rope. Sterling did something with their end caps. They suck now, and they're super huge. Another rope like Black Diamond end caps are probably some of the worst I've ever seen. Mammut, being the great brand that they are, have really clean and precise end caps. I've started switching to only Mammut ropes now. But a lot of ice climbers will pop these things off their rope because it just, you know, it's that much of the rope that cannot bend around the corner. And really, that's what you're doing with your little multi-hook is you're making sure that the rope bends around the corner. So a lot of times I'm not even trying to hook this thing. And this rope is so tightly woven that I don't know if I will hook it. But I pass this through. When you have your holes, you know, if they're not quite intersected, pass the rope down the second hole and not the first one. And sometimes you have to twist the rope. You see right now, if I twist the end of the rope, that end goes up. So sometimes when I'm in there, I have to twist the end of the rope, especially if my holes are not perfectly intersected, you know, like on the flat plane. And then I just use this hook to get it around the hole. And once I get this rope curved through, like facing towards me, I can just push from this end. And a lot of times the rope comes through the other end. Other times, if you get this thing hooked around like some part of the end cap or something like that, you can pull it out also. But if you practice at it, it can be pretty fast, like weaving these things through. I do have another tool right over here. I haven't used this in quite a while. This is called the J snare, which I can't unhook from itself. This thing, a lot of people prefer the J snare. I just sort of stopped using it one day, I guess. And you can bend it out. This is made by, you know, just like a garage company. So if you want to support a smaller climbing company, you buy yourself a J snare. And so there we go. Like make it a bit long. You can see how the tube is tapered. So you're supposed to be able to line it up just like this. And then if you pull, you see how the tube kind of stays low profile. And the thing people like about this is you can tighten it from this end. It's like literally an animal snare. And you pull out, but it doesn't have any hook to kind of hook into the sheath of your rope. So some people don't really like the hook going in the rope. They say it kind of like destroys the rope faster, but I know the rope's going to get destroyed anyway, in my opinion. Whoop. I'm dropping everything today. So yeah, the J snare is pretty nice if you want to protect your ropes a little bit more. It's still worth getting that end cap to pop off though, because that thing really slides through well. Just having a slightly older rope in general helps out too. But that's a little bit about V threads. Anything? I think I answered everyone's questions. Does anyone have any more? Now's your time to type something up. It's okay. I'll wait a bit. I think dinner's done upstairs. So Yeah, I think that's just about the main things I wanted to cover from this live stream. Just kind of recapping. There are plenty of other things to talk about, obviously, but ice climbing is pretty interesting sport. You know, it's not exactly something that I do all winter, but I actually have been enjoying a lot of my ice climbing days. I have an intermediate ice course I'm teaching at the first of the month, next month, and that'll be super fun. So, been enjoying getting back into ice climbing, that's for sure. Okay, seems like there's not many more questions coming in. Um, Hope that everyone found this useful. It's about 1 hour 30 now, so it's about as much time as I was going to go anyway. Um, if you want a bit more ice climbing stuff or you want to see me doing this in the real world, you can always check out my videos on ice climbing. I have ones about anchors, placing ice screws, making V threads for sure. Um, and then I'll probably make some more in the future just talking about other stuff. I just released a video where I rambled on about ice screws, more thoughts on that, and specific ice screws that I use, like my entire ice screw collection there. Um, and yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys for tuning in. We had a steady stream of people. Um, I wanted to also, while I was here with an audience, promote another company that was made by a friend of mine. His name is Brian. It's called Access the Alpine. And it's basically if you want to do anything up in Washington, then he's a great guy to go to. It's kind of a one man, two man sort of operation right now. But yeah, it's a great guy and he has a lot of info. So if you ever wanted to sign up for something in Washington, then go ahead and give him a call. You can also message me and I can send you his way. Wait, what is this? What is your current twin half rope setup? Ha, funny you say that. I actually currently don't have any of those because I retired my Sterling Fusion Photons. I think that's what they're called. They were a twin and half rope. These Mammut ropes I've been using, these are actually triple rated ropes. This is the Alpine Sender Dry 8.7, but it's still a single rated rope. This is a 50 meter that I own. And then I also have right here. These ones are older because I bought them last year, but these are two 60 meter, same deal Alpine Senders. And I used nearly both of these for an entire season short roping in the Alpine, and they're still in my collection. So that shows you a little bit something about their durability. And those are triple rated ropes. So I could use them for half or twin ropes. And if I was maybe leading on an ice climb, I would use ropes that are as far as single rated ropes. But some that I did have my eyes on were Mammuts. I think they were called the Sender. They're part of the Sender series. I'm blanking on their names right now, but Mammut makes some really good half and twin certified ropes. So those are probably what I'm going to buy in the future, maybe around summer or so. But working as a guide, I actually don't use twin and half ropes too much. It's more of a personal thing with me. So that's why I haven't bought new ones yet. I just haven't used them in a long time. But yeah, if I was like ice climbing, using these two ropes in tandem would not be out of the question for sure. And I would use them as full half ropes instead of twin ropes. All right, cool. So that was the last question. I wanted to say thank you again for tuning in and showing me all your questions. I hope you guys got something out of this. And yeah, if you have any ideas for live stream in the future, I'm probably going to do another one in maybe 2-ish months or something, maybe a bit more rock climbing. Or actually, no, I think I was planning to do something more glacier focused since that will be around March or April is going to be the start of glacier season. I'm also happy to do one that's more big wall focused. I have a plan for a big wall coming up, me personally, but yeah, if you guys have any other ideas, then go ahead, give them a shout. A big shout out to a partner of mine is High Mountain Gear right there. This is made by actually a guy that I met a while back. His name is Kyle, but he makes all these sort of deals. This is called the ice screw cannon. I have a video about it. It can fit like 16 ice screws and more. You can fit a lot of crap in here, but it's mostly made for ice screws. So It's a great little piece of gadgetry to keep your screws in. You don't have to have the sleeves or the little condoms on them. So, and they all stay good. They protect your gear. It's made out of very robust material. So, yeah, go ahead, give them a shout out, and you can use my affiliate link if you want to help support me on that one while also buying yourself some cool gear. They also make some really cool big wall stuff too. So, I think that's enough rambling now. I'm going to go ahead and call out. And yeah, I'll see you guys all in the next one. If you have any ideas, go ahead and let me know.